I know. Did you want to wipe your camera off a little bit?
Okay. Oh, maybe that's it. The camera. Uh,
Yeah.
it
See
could
if
be
that
it.
helps.
Hi, this is Babz Rawls-Ivy from New Haven, Connecticut, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, streaming live at newhavenindependent.org.
Oh, welcome back to LoveBabz, LoveTalk. This is the second hour, and I get to talk to Clifton Graves, who is I'm making him do all kinds of stuff with his phone because he looks blurry, and I want him to be sharp and in focus. I don't know, Harry, what should we do here? Harry's my producer. He knows all the tricks of the trade. And unmute yourself so I can hear you, Cliff. Can you turn your phone on its side like this? Put it in landscape. That's fine. All right. Well, you have to unmute yourself. We could just start talking.
All right, here I am.
That's all right.
Okay.
I see you.
All right, you can see me. I'm blurry, but the people need to see me. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
people need to see you. He said people don't need to see you.
They know what I look like.
That's right. And it's it's radio too.
Yeah.
So people who listen on the radio can't see you know how.
That's true. Well, it's all good. They know my
How
voice.
you doing?
How are you? I finally get to your show.
It took a solemn occasion to get you to my show.
I apologize for that. I should have been on here a long time ago.
And you will be back because you owe me like 8,000 appearances.
I owe you at least. But anyway, how are you? Everything's good with you?
I love summer. Summer, it's good. It's been it's been a summer, so so
for sure.
So tell me, how do you know Charles Ogletree? I mean, I know all you lawyerly types know each other, but
actually, it was interesting. I met Charles, who actually, if you met him, if you walked, God bless his soul, if you met him, perhaps the first thing he would say to you would be, "Just call me Tree." He was a humble brother. I met him when I was in law school. We were in law school at the same time. He was at Harvard, and I was at Georgetown. But his best friend, Reginald Turner, was a classmate of mine at Georgetown. So this is in the mid 70s. And oh gosh, I'm dating myself. And so Charles it was at Harvard, and it was campaigning to run for national president of the Black Law Students Association. And so Reggie was his campaign manager. So Reggie brought Charles down to Georgetown because we had a large contingent of inactive Black students in my school. And I was active in the Black Student Union, so he wanted to make sure I introduced Charles, and got introduced to Charles, and help him with his campaign. So that's how we met, and we hit it off right away because we had similar interests, and I was impressed with his brilliance, his intelligence, his commitment, and so we struck up a friendship then. But it was navigated primarily by Reggie Turner, my classmate, and that's how it started. So one key thing was about our relationship. So Charles, during this time, it's interesting how life comes full circle, Babz. At the time, the Bakke case was being heard by the Supreme Court. That was the case, of course, that dealt with admissions in undergraduate and graduate schools. And the race could be, and the issue was then Alan Bakke, a white student in California, had challenged the University of California's practices of setting aside a certain number of slots in their medical school for Black students and Latinos. And so that case was coming up, and we thought then that'd be a threat to the existence of folk like us in law school and those coming behind us. So we rallied, and Charles was in the leadership of that, and I was on his leadership team. So we had a big rally. We rallied college students and law students from around the country to come to march on the Capitol. Not like the folk on January 6th. We marched peaceably to the Capitol, and we had a nice, peaceful march. Listen, 25,000, Babz, 25,000 students, mostly African-American and Latino, and then whites as well, joined us to protest and advocate for racial parity and justice in the admissions process. And so Charles and I, we were part of that. So the reason I mentioned it because later, 20 years later, when Tree wrote his book called All Deliberate Speed, his autobiography and his analysis and critique of 50 years after the Brown versus Board of Education decision, I pick up the book and I'm thumbing through the book, and halfway through the book, I see this picture of Charles Ogletree and me in the book at the rally in Washington at 78. And so I didn't know, Charles didn't call me, let me know he was gonna put my picture in the book. So I had to call him. I called him up and I said, Tree, you put me in the book. So I was honored and humbled he put me in the book. Then I said, of course, do I get any royalties from this? Do I get like something from you put my picture in this book? And so we laughed about that. We joked about that every time we saw each other. But I was humbled and honored to be a part of that. And we kept that relationship and nurtured it. But during his career, I followed his career. When he graduated from Harvard Law School, he came back to Washington, and I was still in law school. And he became a lawyer with the D.C. Public Defender's Office. And I was in a criminal justice seminar at Georgetown, and I went out, reached out to Tree, and he let me sit in on some of his cases that he was handling. And of course, as you know, DC Public Defender Office is one of the best in the country. In fact, as the sister who's the judge in this Trump case now, she came out of the DC Public Defender Office and was known as a tough lawyer and a tough advocate, similar to Tree. So Tree does that, and he goes on, and he just has a stellar career going on. He gets hired at Harvard to teach law there, where he was a mainstay for a couple of decades. Quite frankly, he had public television shows. He had an advocacy show similar to it was like a combination of Meet the Press and 60 Minutes, where he would bring scholars from different points of view to discuss issues of the day. And he would be the moderator for those discussions. I think it was an award-winning show he did. And of course, as you know, he represented folks like Tupac as well as Anita Hill.
Yes, and Anita Hill.
And Anita Hill. Yeah, which is and he got, I gotta tell you, that was an interesting crossroads in his life when he represents Anita Hill, and of course advocating for her against Clarence Thomas. We should have listened to him, quite frankly, but we didn't. But nonetheless, but he got a lot of criticism for that, because he was this black man, even with his political background, conservative background, to Clarence Thomas being what people perceived as being attacked by Anita Hill, and Tree was defending Anita Hill and advocating for her. He was her lawyer, and he got a lot of criticism for that. But in hindsight, in retrospect, as I said earlier, it appears that Anita Hill, we should have listened to Anita Hill and Charles Ogletree, consider what we had Thomas, and I'm going to say that on the record. But nonetheless, he survived that, and his credibility and integrity remained intact. And he went on later, as you may remember, he went to Oklahoma to speak at a program honoring John Blassingame's John Hope Franklin's father, who was a lawyer during the Black Wall Street during that time. And when he got out there, he was shocked to discover there were still people living, Babz. There were survivors of the Tulsa massacre, the Black Wall Street massacre, these folks were children, like literally 5, 6 years old when the massacre happened. But now they were in their 90s, and some even over 100 who were still alive, who could recall and recollect what happened. And he met with them, and he was so moved because he said he had not heard that story, even though he was a Stanford graduate, Harvard Law School graduate, a scholar in many respects, but had not heard of what transpired in Tulsa. And so he decided to tackle that case and become an advocate for the survivors of the Tulsa race riot, the massacre there. And he went before the Congress, went before the courts, trying to get justice and reparations for them. And that battle continues to this very day, quite frankly.
Yeah. So were you stunned that at 62 he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's?
Yeah, I was. When I heard it actually through, of course, Reggie. Reggie and I, his best friend, Reggie, they were both best men at each other's weddings. and his board, as he calls him. But I just heard from him this morning, and he's of course still grieving, but he was overwhelmed by this outpouring of support and acclamation for Charles, for Tree. So anyway, so Reggie called me and said, because I was trying to, you appreciate this, I was trying to get Tree to come to speak here. I wanted him to come to speak at either NAACP Freedom Fund dinner or just come to New Haven to speak. And because he's at Harvard, so he wouldn't have a problem coming to Yale, of course. but the problem was, since I reached out to him, I was trying to reach out to him through Reggie, and Reggie indicated then, he said on the download, so you got to keep this to yourself. But Charles has early onset, what's it called, on, the word.
Early onset Alzheimer's. Yeah, early onset Alzheimer's.
Yeah, he had that. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. This English major. So, anyways, on a serious tip, I heard it from Reggie, and I was stunned, yes, and saddened, because he's 62 and he was a brilliant lawyer, and at the peak of his career, because at that time I believe Barack Obama, I think it was ending, was wrapping up his presidency, and they were very close, as you know.
Yeah, because he was his professor.
Yeah, so Ogletree, yeah, so he was professor first for Ketanji Jackson, of course, who's on the Supreme Court now.
And Michelle Obama.
And Michelle Obama. He taught both. So listen, Tree came to UConn several years ago before this onset, the dementia and Alzheimer's, rather, and spoke at UConn. And I was invited. I got word of whatever, met him there. We talked for a while. I'm sitting in his car with him. He says to me, well, I taught both Barack and Michelle, and I'll tell you, Cliff, Michelle's a lot smarter than Barack. He said a whole lot smarter. And so we laughed at that. But anyway, he taught them both. And so my thinking was, quite frankly, that had Barack, first of all, two things. Had Charles not gotten sick, and had Barack Obama had another opportunity to appoint a Supreme Court justice, Charles Ogletree would have been at the top of that list, because he was a scholar, well learned, and educated and experienced, and I believe he'd have been at the top of his list, and there'd been some pushback, I'm sure, from some Republicans, but I think for the most part he would have gotten through the Senate without a major problem. But unfortunately, because of two things: one, I think his illness primarily. And it could have been a thing. And also, I thought about this, Babz. Remember, Charles Ogletree was Anita Hill's lawyer to advocating against Clarence Thomas. So it might have been a problem there as well if he got on the Supreme Court with Clarence Thomas. I'm not sure how that would have worked out. But I'm sure they probably thought, I had to believe that the Tree and President Obama talked about that. So I don't know how this would work, man. But in any event, but he was a great scholar and mentor. Even when Barack and Michelle were in the White House, Tree was invited to the White House on many occasions to sit down and discuss issues with them. He even did a seminar at Harvard Law School on Obama's presidency while
yes.
Obama was the president. So they were very close, and well respected by the Obamas, for sure.
And he was Tupac Shakur's attorney too.
Yeah, interesting enough. Yeah. Which is funny how that happened. That he gets to be Tupac, but again, his reputation similar to Johnny Cochran. Both of them from California, but and they knew each other. And by the way, so going back to the Oklahoma case quickly, so Charles Tree assembled a group of lawyers from around the country, including Johnny Cochran, to assist him with that Oklahoma case. But I think because of Tree's reputation around the country, people recognize his scholarship and his brilliance and his capabilities. And I'm sure words filtered down to Tupac's people, and that was why they reached out to him and to serve as his counsel. And he had no problem doing that, because he was a lawyer first and foremost, and wanted to make sure everyone was treated fairly and justly. Yeah,
wow.
Tupac.
But
that's Tupac, the Anita Hill. Yes, certainly that. And of course, the Oklahoma.
That's very extreme. These are three extreme things.
Absolutely. But that was Tree, but again, he was as brilliant as he was, and he was just as humble. And he'd walk into a room unassuming, and that's the way he was. That's the way he was brought up. And And it just made him that's what made him so special, quite frankly, in my eyes.
So Cliff, talk about, I mean, y'all were in law school at the height of, right in the middle of the civil rights, all the civil rights stuff, like the Black Power movement. I mean, the 70s was hot. So, I mean, did it solidify your reasoning for wanting to be an attorney? And your contemporaries, when you look back on them now, I mean, were heavy hitters.
Oh, for sure. And I was honored and blessed to be a part of that generation of lawyers. You're right. Those of us in law school in the mid 70s, of course, were in high school in the late 60s, and then in college from late 60s, early 70s. So by the time we get to law school, and I graduated from Tufts University in 1975, went to Georgetown, and the group of students who came out from no matter where they were, whether from struggling Black colleges or schools like Tree and Reggie from Stanford, other Ivy League schools, we had a common bond because of the political atmosphere that had been created at that time. Because at the time we were in law school, the Ben Chavis and the Wilmington 10 were still incarcerated and fighting for justice. There were countless other cases, Black Panther cases around the country, where folks were still incarcerated, still fighting for justice and freedom. The FBI the COINTEL program was still in effect as far as identifying and targeting what they considered to be African American men and women who were threats to American security. And so there was a need for lawyers. So when we meet and talk and when we discuss things, it was about how do we train ourselves as lawyers to fight these battles. And it wasn't everybody. Let's be clear. Some of the lawyers, some of my colleagues and classmates were saying, "Okay, we understand that, but I'm here to become a corporate lawyer. I want to go into corporate law. I want to make some money and build," and that's fine. We acknowledged that, respected that. But there was a core group of folks, and Tree was in the center of that, who tried to encourage us that we had an obligation and responsibility to fight for social justice, for racial justice, and challenge the inequities in the criminal justice system, which is why, again, his first job out of law school at Harvard was to work in the D.C. Public Defender Office. Now, you got to imagine, you can appreciate the fact, coming out of Harvard Law School with a Stanford undergraduate degree, Tree had the world was his oyster. He could have probably taken any number of jobs in corporate America, doing other things that would have made a lot more money for him. But he purposely chose to come to D.C., the nation's capital, that chocolate city at that time, to come and fight, because he understood clearly how the criminal justice system was inequitable and mistreating scores and scores of young Black men in particular. So he came to fight that battle, and that was his first job out of law school. And he was trying to encourage us and motivate many of us to roll up our sleeves and fight these battles. But right, to your point, yes, there were any number of cases. So going back to the Wilmington 10 case, we worked with the Black Law Student Association. We invited the lawyers who actually practicing at the time to come and talk to us about those cases. And we actually did research, and they commissioned us and brought us in to be volunteer researchers on some of those cases. But it was a challenging time, but certainly a time that certainly shaped my career in terms of being in social service and community activism, and countless other of my friends. I never get into this story quickly. We were during this period of time when Black students were sitting around talking about what we plan to do and the struggles we plan to fight. And I never forget this, Babz. There was one of our white classmates who overheard us talking about some of these cases, Wilmington 10, Black Panthers, and social injustices. And he came up to us and said, "Listen, you mind if I tell you something?" We said, "Sure." He said, "Listen, I want to let you know how much I admire all of you men and women for coming to law school and having a purpose and a focus in life." He said, he's from South Carolina, by the way. He said, "I'm a young white boy from South Carolina. My path is already paved. All my father and grandfather told me to do is graduate. As soon as I graduate, I got a job waiting for me and my parent and my family law firm, and I'll be fine. I'll be fine the rest of my life. All I gotta do is show up and go to work. I'm good." He said, "That's all, and that's all I have to live for. I have no focus, no plans, no agenda. Just graduate from law school and go work for my family law firm." He said, "You guys, on the other hand, have a purpose, have a fire, have a burning. There's a burning I sense in your stomach to fight and to have something to live for and to fight for. And he said, honestly and candidly, he said, I admire that because I don't have that. And that's something that stuck with me all these years later, Babz. Now, he didn't speak for everybody, but certainly it was indicative of the times in which we live and the different purposes, quite frankly, even to this very day, that law students and even black professionals in any realm, your profession, in journalism, and whether it's in medicine, whether it's in engineering, whether it's in teaching, law, whatever profession we find ourselves in, we should have, because of circumstances, a different purpose, a different agenda than other folk, because of the conditions of our community, the situations we find ourselves in. So,
wow,
yeah,
that's pretty damn.
Yeah,
wow.
It's deep, but
that is deep.
It's deep, and it's something that stuck with me all these years later. I said about this guy, and he was as honest and candid as he could be, but he appreciated us, and that's something that stuck with me. And even some of my colleagues to this very day, we remember that discussion with him, and talk about that and how it is just true. It's so true. And
so how do you feel now, Clifton? I mean, this is a full circle moment. I mean, we've seen the Supreme Court, this particular setting of Supreme Court justices undo so many gains. You know, I mean, how does that? How do you reconcile that in your legal mind?
It's difficult. These cases, the case, certainly this case, the Students for Fairness and Admissions. That was the plaintiff's name in those cases against the University of North Carolina and Harvard, challenging their affirmative action policies. The Students for Fair Admissions, what I find is an interesting name, quite frankly, given what they were fighting for and fighting against. So it's a challenge, and for me, it's very remorseful and reflective for me to look back on all this and say, gee, we were fighting 40 years ago, almost 50 years ago. We were fighting for equity, fairness, and opportunity, and then now things are coming full circle in many respects. And so I fret for the students coming behind me, the students that are in high school now or in college now, especially the African American and Latino students, the students of color, because now they have to fight this battle almost all over again and come up with different strategies. So it's sad in a way, but it's also again it reminds us that what we've been told, you were told, I've been told and taught over the years, that this battle is far from over. It's a daily battle. You know, John Lewis said it, Frederick Douglass said it 150 years ago. You know, this struggle may be a moral one or a physical one, but it must be a struggle. You know, power concedes nothing without a demand. Never has, never will. You know, you may not get all you pay for in this world, but you got to pay for whatever you get. And that's where we are. We have to continue to fight this battle. It's unfortunate, but it's true. But to your point, but on the other hand is this. I was fortunate to teach a course this past semester at Quinnipiac Law School in constitutional law, civil rights. And we focused in on this case, quite frankly, even before it was heard before the Supreme Court, as well as countless other cases, from the abortion rights case to cases dealing with the LGBTQ community. We talked about civil rights and equity and justice in America. And I got to tell you, that I was pleased and heartened by the fact that these young students, there were 17 law students in Quinnipiac. There were only 2 students of color. There was a Latina and one African American sister in the class. There were only 2. Everybody else was Caucasian. But to their credit, the majority of those students were like, we have to commit ourselves as law students today to fight these battles, whether it was in indigenous rights, whether it's African American, Latino. It was across the board. And again, there's a small group. It's not everybody, but I was heartened by their commitment, their knowledge, their criticism of the current court and its policies and what's going on in the country. And so I'm hopeful that this is going on in other classrooms across the country, at Howard, at Harvard, at Yale.
I was just about to ask you, do you think that there's this renewed sense in the law, or for law students to pick up these mantles and run, right? Are you Does that, hopefully we're seeing that. Do you think we're seeing that?
I hope so. But I'm hopeful because here's the thing. Even I remind, I teach African American history at Gateway. And I remind my students every semester, every year that at the height, we have to remember in our history, at the height of the Civil Rights Movement, less than 15% of Black people were involved. It wasn't like everybody. When you see the films and whether it's the March on Washington or folks in the street, you say, oh, everybody was marching, everybody was demonstrating. No, that was only a small group of folk who were out there knocking on doors, getting folks registered to vote, standing in the streets, marching, getting hosed with the water hose and bitten by the dog. That was only a small percentage of us, and even a smaller percentage of Black lawyers who were involved in fighting these battles. But it was a core group, a committed group. That's why we applaud and commend folks like Constance Baker Motley and Thurgood Marshall and that core group of advocates, and Charles Hamilton Houston, of course, who was their teacher and mentor. But so to your point, there won't be we don't need to be a whole lot of folks. But as long as my sense of it is, my hope is that if Quinnipiac of all places is in indicator of a cadre of folk at Quinnipiac, and if there can be a cadre at Yale Law School, which I have to believe there might be, because Yale does have teachers there who were products of and certainly beneficiaries of affirmative action programs and the civil rights movement. There's still lawyers, and Black and white, who are there at these law schools, Yale in particular, I would think, more so the Quinnipiac, I would say. But Quinnipiac does have Marilyn Ford, who's been, as you may know, a staunch advocate, fighter for civil rights for many years.
And my sorority sister.
and your story, absolutely. Got to throw that in there, for sure. So you know all about Marilyn Ford, who's an icon in my mind. And certainly she's been, I think, the sole person, I think, responsible for the increase in number of Black students at Quinnipiac, and for them having even a course in civil rights that I was able to teach. So folks like that, as long as they're around, we can count on and at least hope that there are folks who will encourage and motivate students to come out here and fight these battles. But I also understand these battles are difficult, especially in these days and times, because the courts are filled with judges appointed by not just Trump, but even before him, Bush, but primarily Trump. Trump appointed a slew of federal judges all around the country by design. So and these are federal judges. Even before these cases get before the Supreme Court, it's more for it's the federal judges who make decisions on a lot of these cases. So it's a difficult time to live in, but it's a challenging time. And my hope is that these law students of all races who committed to racial justice, social justice, economic justice, gender justice, will find a way to mobilize, organize, and connect with these entities around the country, like the Legal Defense Fund out of New York and countless others, and fight these battles, continue to fight these battles, as difficult as they might be.
So how do you want the world to remember Professor Ogletree? And how will you remember Professor Ogletree?
But first, I deal with the world first, then I'll come back to my personal reflection. The world should remember him as a brilliant legal scholar, activist. There have been scores of Black men and women who made their mark in the legal profession. Charles Ogletree stood on the shoulders of, like I stand on the shoulders of many of those folk, like Charles Hamilton Houston, who he named, he was the founding director of that institute at Harvard Law School. Charles Hamilton Houston, of course, brilliant lawyer, Amherst, Harvard, became dean of Howard Law School, mentor to Thurgood Marshall, and countless others. And in terms of he trained lawyers, he said lawyers should be social engineers. So Charles Ogletree stands on Charles Hamilton's shoulders, as well as people like not Thurgood Marshall, Constance Baker Motley, Leon Higginbotham, and others. So he should be. I would consider him to be on the Mount Rushmore of African American legal thinkers, jurors, advocates, for sure. Some people may challenge that, but certainly I think he should be. We should remember it as that as well, and as one who was a brilliant legal scholar. Again, as I said, activist, advocate, but also humble, down to earth, and as humble as one could be, given his stature, status, and the reverence with which people to this very day, and we'll continue to hold up his name. That's how we should remember him. And fearless, a fearless advocate, a speaker of truth to power, and one who was committed to the uplifting of our community and this country, quite frankly. And on a personal note, I remember him for all those things, but also I remember just again this down to earth guy who had a great sense of humor. Again, humble as one could be, and who I said the story about that picture. I mentioned at the outset about my picture being in the book. So this is a sidebar, and I remember Tree. This is Tree. He had my picture in the book with him. The two of us are there in the book at the rally, at the back of the rally in front of the U.S. Capitol. And so I looked at the picture. So I called Tree. I said, "Well, Tree, you have my picture in here with you, but you don't put my name. You have my name in here." So he said, "Oh, Cliff, I'm sorry." So he said, "I'll take care of it." So within a month, man, he sends me an autographed copy of the book with my picture in it, with my name under it. He said, and so that was Tree. Now, of course, I was just joking with him, but he took the slight serious enough. He called the publisher, put my name in the book, sent me the copy, autographed, and said, "Cliff, I'm sorry, you my boy." And so, but that was Tree. And that's his humility and his down to earthness. And so I remember that and about him the rest of my life, and appreciate his friendship, his brilliance, and his compassion, and his mentorship in many ways, for all of us to be the best we can be, and do the best we can do as we fight the struggle for social and racial justice in America. Yeah, wow. Charles Ogletree, my man.
I so appreciate you taking the time to remember your friend, because I admired him from afar, Yeah. I really did. And I followed his career. I remember seeing him, on the State of the Black Union and facilitating the conversations. That's how I came to know him.
Absolutely.
And then when he was on PBS doing the Ethics in America roundtable stuff, I was fascinated by the way he would pose these questions about, a question of ethics and the people that were around that table, just really wrestling with these things. And I was just fascinated by it. So I've been a fan for the last 25 years or so of him and his mind and brilliance.
He was great, and absolutely. And it's interesting how you say that, how he would, even though it was clear about what his political perspective was, but he surrounded himself. He had no problem being around folks of different political persuasions, because that sharpened his mind, and sharpened his analyses. And so going back, so you're in the vineyard. So when they premiered this film about before they died, about the Tulsa survivors, actually it was premiered there in Martha's Vineyard at that film festival years ago. So Reggie Turner, his best friend and roommate from college, and my classmate at Georgetown. Reggie was a producer, because he's been a lawyer. In addition to being a lawyer, he's a filmmaker. And so, but Charles, of course, was an integral part of the film. So they both were there. Reggie invited me up. I'm there. And of course, Tree is there as a panelist, and which is great. And of course, that film room, that auditorium was packed to the brim. And then, of course, afterwards, we go to dinner. And so Tree invites Alan Dershowitz, Dershowitz, the lawyer from Harvard, who was a lawyer for Trump. in recent years, he's been one of Trump's lawyers. But Tree, and of course they had different political points of view. But Tree invited Dershowitz to have dinner with this group of folks after the film, because again, that's Tree. Irrespective of political positions or persuasions, he welcomed that and embraced that. I think, and others have embraced him for his willingness not to just to exclude himself and surround himself with folk who are like thinkers. And so that's another contribution and an attribute of Tree. And I remember that clearly. I said, I'm looking around and said, this is kind of funny that Dershowitz is here with Tree. But and Al Sharpton. we had to tell you about it. It was too funny. But there was Al Sharpton, Tree, and Alan Dershowitz. at the dinner table, and I'm saying, well, gee, I'm fascinated by all this. I'm watching all this unfold, but that was Tree. He had the ability to bring people of different backgrounds and persuasions together and in harmony and discuss issues of the day, but also have dinner as human beings. And that's another, again, as I said a minute ago, that was Tree. And that's something that I'll never forget, for sure.
Thank you, Cliff Graves,
Yeah.
former probate judge of New Haven. I thank you for this. I want you to come back because I really enjoyed talking to you. And I know there's so many other things that we could talk about. So thank you for your time. So don't dodge me.
Well, I'll give you two. We certainly, yeah, we can. I owe you. We can talk about probate court, of course. We can talk about African American history, Dixwell Church that I'm moderator for. We a lot of stuff we can talk about in terms of history and our struggle today. So anytime, I owe you at least nine more sessions. So
9,000 more sessions.
9,000. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm serious. I'm gonna reach out to you. I'm gonna set some dates up. So I want you to come on. I want you to come on to talk more because I like what you're saying. So I appreciate it. And I know other people would love to hear it. So thank you.
I'm humble that you asked me. I appreciate you. Thank you for all you do. You do a great service to our community. I say that sincerely. Educating, enlightening us. And so God bless you. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good day. I'll see you soon.
I'm sure you will. Not about the blurriness. All right. Take care.
That's all right. We'll work it out.
Take care. Have a good day, bro. All right,
bye. All right, Harry Droz. I'm not here tomorrow and I'm not here Friday because I'll be on Martha's Vineyard. So I'll be back on Tuesday because I won't be here Monday because I'll be coming back from Martha's Vineyard. So I will see y'all Tuesday. Y'all behave and be good. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Paul. I'll see y'all.
Mm-hmm.